Welcome back to everyone. We're back again with a beautiful video about a beautiful film. And we're going to get straight into the matter. The film that we have announced the previous video that we're going to review today is none other but Alfred Hitchcock's Notorious. There it is, without the gear. One of the greatest, probably romantic / espionage films. This is before the Bond thrillers of the 60s. Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman, at the height of their career, they have been part of this masterpiece.
I was going to say it doesn't get much better than that in terms of like, A-tier actors at that time who were really in their prime.
Yeah, especially Ingrid Bergman, who has done only a couple of pictures since Casablanca, and truly Notorious sort of solidified her role into Hollywood and also into the hearts of the American people as
Absolutely.
a beautiful actress present in Hollywood. Yeah. I know that you haven't seen this movie as much as I've seen. This is your second?
This is my second viewing, which definitely helped. It's very important to see movies multiple times to really try to understand the message and how you personally feel about it.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, like, the score remained the same for me, but my appreciation for it grew in terms of a Hitchcock film.
What do you think of the story itself and the setting?
I love, like, what other film is more iconic than this film going to Rio? You know, it's I can't really express how unique that is to see that in what is this, 40s film?
This is 46, yeah.
Yeah, to see that in a 40s film. I don't know, it was just something like when they're on the plane and you see the statue of Christ when you're coming into Rio, and you're just like, man, like we're really going here. I thought the locations were great. I thought the beginning was also really good with the car. That whole bit was fantastic. And then like I said, once you get into that mansion, that house, it picks up. Like the movie is great in the beginning, but that's where it like that's where it's about to go down. You know, you're about to get into the grit, the nitty-gritty of the plot.
Well, I just want to sort of, I don't know, say that I don't think the action really starts with the house. It starts when they are at the races. And Ingrid Bergman is meeting with Cary Grant, and she starts crying and all that. And then Claude Reins, who gives a magnificent performance in this wonderful film as sort of the villain, which in a sense, he is considered the villain, but at the end of the film, you feel so sorry for him, you know, in a way.
Yeah, but
yeah.
It's anyway, difficult.
It's a difficult question. But that point where Claude Rains comes to Ingrid Bergman and says, you know, like he's jealous that she's seeing she has seen them with the he has seen her with I was about to say Ingmar Bergman with Cary Grant.
Yeah.
And he says, do you really have no connections with Mr. Devlin? And she was like, no. Okay, I'll make sure that you have no connections. And that sort of implies I'm gonna marry you. And like that, like ominous face that Sebastian makes in the film, and his speech to Ingrid, very Hitchcockian. I think that's when the movie really starts to take off.
That's after the house, when she first enters the house?
This is this is after she enters the house. They go for the first time, they have dinner and all that, and then now they spend their times together, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I love the meetings that they have with the what's the word I'm looking for? The head, like the investigative crew, when she's there and Cary Grant is there, and you have this dynamic between them where you know that they're in love, sort of, but nobody else knows this. And they're both, you know, she has to go undercover, and it just plays out so well, and I love them planning the situation out and them talking about it like, okay, this is how we're gonna get it done and whatever, and the little nuances between Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman are so well written. Yeah,
I really enjoy how, as you said, their romance or their love interest is not even exposed to the intelligent officers,
hmm,
but in a way they sort of know when she goes as an emergency to them and she says something really big is going to happen. They were
yeah.
like, what? Sebastian asked me to marry him. And everybody was like, oh, that's great. And then you just see Cary Grant just turn from the window. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, and
what
he
the-
leaves at some point. There's a point when there's a scene
yeah,
where they're talking, and he just goes because I don't think he can.
yeah, they're sitting on the, I think they're sitting on the bench or something like that. And then I don't know if it was Carrie who tells her or it was somebody else from the intelligence office who says, Mr. Devlin has requested for transfer to Spain.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then we see him no more until he goes to the house at the end of the film,
Hmm.
which we will not
This is
spoil.
true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me see what else I said. So and from in the beginning, just to go back for a little bit with the car where the officer pulls them over because she's driving drunk,
Yeah.
and he just hands him, his ID or whatever it is, and the officer leaves them alone, and she's like, "Who are you really?" And then like that's where that starts to unfold and whatnot, and we eventually get. This film is infamous for having like, it's funny because we mentioned this yesterday, one of the longest kissing scenes,
That's right.
but also one of the shortest scenes where we're supposed to infer that two characters have fallen in love. Because I remember the first time watching this film and I was like, that was it. Like they're in love. Like we had one scene with them where they had some sort of intimacy.
So this is where I want to point out something that I don't like about this film, and which is the fill-in scenes. Like we know when they are flying with the on the plane and they're on the plane and they're talking, and then there's supposed to be a cut, and then you go to the hotel. No, what Hitchcock wanted to do was like, you know what, as a transition shot or as a transition scene, we're just gonna show 30 seconds of that scene.
Yeah.
Uh, and they're like driving in a car up on a mountain, and then they start like they embrace each other and they fall in love. I'm like, yes, you could have done this in a different way. You could have just combined that scene into the hotel scene and just make the hotel
Yeah.
scene longer, and that would have been it. But
Yeah, it's just I've seen a few people talk about this movie, and most of them share the same sentiment where they're like, the characters fall in love so fast.
yeah.
And in a way you can say, yes, it's to get to the plot of the film and what's going to happen later on. Like this is not a romance film. We're not focusing just on their romance. There's more to tell than that. And I
Mm-hmm.
get it. But maybe just a little bit longer, like a minute, maybe just some dialogue. I don't know. It was like they were on top of a mountain and they kissed each other, and now we're in Rio. And you're just like, okay, that's cool.
This happened, yeah. But
And then we get
in
the balcony scene.
balcony scene, what an erotic sort of sensation one gets of like just looking at Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman,
Hmm.
you know,
They're
kiss,
so close the entire time. They're
smooching each other for like what, 5 minutes,
that's what
seven,
it feels like. I mean,
7 minutes.
they make it from the balcony to the living room to the phone ringing, I think,
Yeah,
to someone picking up the phone, and then them still being like attached to each other.
yeah, yeah.
It's pretty wild, pretty wild.
The
And
next scene,
then
yes, the next scene that I hope you picked up on is the key scene, right? The famous key
yeah,
scene.
but so this is when she goes into the house, right?
This is when she's already married.
But she's in the you're talking about the shot that
Yeah, yeah, the crane shot.
yeah.
No,
This is very important.
no, this shot, the reason why I said it's important, it's because it has never been, I don't want to say it has never been done, but just the effort of making that shot just landed perfectly on the hand was very hard because cameras before in the 1940s, they used to be non-reflexive cameras, which means that you have a viewfinder and then you have the opening side of the camera where the film will go, right? Now the viewfinder has to be very close to the lens of the camera.
Right.
But through the viewfinder, you would have to position the camera not on the shot that you would want on
Oh,
screen,
yes. Yes,
but
but to the right of
off.
it or something. Yeah.
Exactly, left or right. Um, and the problem was that this was on a crane. Now you had to be constantly either to the left, in this case, more to the left than to the right, in
Yeah.
order to land that shot at the end perfectly. And also, what was also hard is that you have the technician of the camera. You had to adjust as you were panning in. You had to adjust the focus so everything comes into focus.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you noticed, but at the right before the camera lands on the hand, the image is a little bit blurry, and then it becomes
Yeah.
super clear.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
I did remember that.
because the technician had to
Yeah. I'm the
focus.
thing. I mean, it's honestly a revolutionary shot for that time period. I
Yeah.
mean, nothing like that had been done,
Mm-mm.
which is why it's so important. But I wonder how it was communicated to Ingrid Bergman to at that moment like open her hand and show the key, because I'm thinking like the camera might have been low enough to where she could turn around and see it
Mm-hmm.
and just open her hand with the key a little bit, but it happens so spot on, like someone might have said, and now open your hand, because the camera had gotten there.
Rehearsal. They had
Yeah.
to rehearse it.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Like a lot of times, they had to rehearse it.
Yeah, there's things that are movie magic and there's things that are spoiled by rehearsal like that, so
Yeah, exactly. So moving away from the story, which I just want to touch up on the very last thing. The beauty of this film again is because it's that it's made right after World War II. This is right at the end of the war. You still have the feeling of the Nazis, they're
yeah.
gone, but they're not really gone. So obviously Hitchcock makes this interesting plot in Rio about Nazis who are like hidden, and they were aiding the Nazis in Germany for the war effort. I heard this before, that if this movie would have been made in 1947 instead, these wouldn't be Nazis, these would be communists.
Mm,
As you know, the Cold War would start by 1947.
yeah.
And what an interesting film would have been if this would have
Yeah.
been not about the Nazis, but about communists. An interesting take, which I wonder if Hitchcock would have considered that. He doesn't
Yeah.
consider the whole communist idea until later on in the 1960s when he makes Torn Curtain. Uh, you know,
Hmm.
um,
That is an interesting thought. Like a few years, separated, and you have different characters.
a year, not even a few years. It's just 1 year.
Yeah,
What would have happened?
that's
Uh,
great.
Interesting.
Last few things in regards to the plot are, well, we can talk about the shot in a second. But that whole like last 40 minutes where you're in
Yes.
the house, you're at the
Yes.
party with the
Yes.
bottle, with the coffee, like exquisite. It's so good. That's where it becomes Hitchcockian for me. This is Hitchcock. It's very Hitchcockian.
What's funny in this film is that we don't have a MacGuffin as we usually have. For example, in
Yes.
the 39 Steps, the MacGuffin is the man, the unknown spy that our lead character is searching for. We don't have that, or we don't have the MacGuffin in North by Northwest,
Right.
or not in Vertigo, and in like To Catch a Thief, for example. The MacGuffin only becomes prevalent in the last 40, as you said, last 40 minutes of the film. And what is the MacGuffin? Is what is Sebastian hiding in the
Right.
cellar? And then where is he getting it from?
Mm-hmm. The
That's
mountains.
the mountains. That was such a weird. I was watching it, I was like, is he talking about, the doctor was like, is he talking about actually going to the mountains? And is he going to the mountains to work there? Because that's where his laboratory is.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sebastian with his mother go like, shh, stop talking. She's a spy.
Yeah.
Um, but the greatest thing about this film also is the way of how they're telling you that she is being poisoned,
Yeah.
but nobody's really telling you it's being poisoned. We know that the coffee
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's no scene where we see anyone pouring anything into the coffee, I don't think.
No, it's just coffee.
But it's just, yeah, it's the way it's framed and the way that when it's revealed that it's the coffee that's making her sick, that she comes to this realization. You have the close up of every single person in the room looking at each other, making sure that they're on the same page and seeing if she understood what just happened, because something might have slipped up. So well done. It's honestly awesome. And the shot that I wanted to talk about was when she's on the bed earlier in the film, and you said you have the Dutchman angle with Cary Grant leaning against the wall, and then he comes into the room and like the camera pans up and you're almost upside down at one point and he keeps walking from her perspective is so great. And I love shots like that. And it works so well for that scene.
This is why black and white cinematography is so great, because if you know how you put the lighting into a scene and how to just set the camera down, then magic will ensue for sure. And the other scene that I really loved is when it's a long take, just like the balcony. It's a
Yeah.
long take, a scene. It's when Cary Grant at the end of the film goes and visits um, Ingrid Bergman when she's on the bed, right?
Oh yes. Oh
He comes
so
in
good.
and you follow him with the camera. He sits down on the bed and the camera just sits right, like in his back, overlooking his right shoulder.
Mhm.
And that lighting and the dialogue and all that, it's so good. It's pure cinematic magic happening.
Every time I see the shot where in any film,
Yeah.
uh, if someone stands up, the camera moves with them up.
Yes. Yes.
I immediately, like, the first thing that opened my eyes for that was High and Low when they're sitting at the table and the camera moves up. So I always think of that, even though this came before High and Low for sure. This is
Yes.
60s. But that's the first one where I was like, oh, that was interesting. And then when I saw it again in this film, because I believe there were women sitting on the couch in the beginning of the film in the house, and
Mhm.
the camera just moves up with them as they stand up. And I was like, this is like, I'm realizing it now. Like I'm looking out for these things, and that's what interests me, and I catch those things, which is pretty cool.
Exactly. Exactly. The last point that
Yeah.
I would like to make on this film, and this I realized it when I was watching it last night. As probably you know, North by Northwest, which is
Mhm.
probably Hitchcock's greatest espionage film.
Yeah.
It's the template for the Bond films, which would start in the 1960s. I was watching this last night and I said, this can also be a template for a Bond film, but
Absolutely.
there is no, the comedic side in this film doesn't truly exist as it exists in North by Northwest. But
Yeah.
this espionage thriller, it's more serious, but it has a romantic touch that we would see in the Bond films later on in the 60s and up to this day.
Mhm.
You know, Bond being played by Cary Grant, for instance, and
Yeah.
Ingrid Bergman being his sidekick, who's risking her life um, for the agency, right, for the United States.
Right. Yeah.
Just an interesting. I don't know. Would you see that? Would you consider that idea that this would
Yeah,
also
that
be a template?
it's in a, this sort of laid the groundwork for what Bond films could be, and what they were later on. I totally agree with you. I see where you're coming from with that. And what a great director and both films to take it from. I think they had a great resource in that
Mhm.
sense to take it from these two films that we mentioned. Um, for me, this film is a 4.
Same for me.
Uh, I think when I think of this film, I mean, this is after the second viewing, I have more appreciation, like I said. But when I think of this film, I, I don't think immediately Hitchcock's best work, because the other films come to mind, the ones that have been almost idolized in pop culture as well, like
Yes.
Psycho and Vertigo and all those other films. Um, Nonetheless, it is still an incredible film, an incredible watch, and I love it way more now. I think it's a fantastic film.
For me, it's a 4 as well. Even though I love this film, it's just that, again, it's because of the extra scenes that makes this a 4 for me.
Yeah.
Um, just like in Some Like It Hot, for example. The reason why the people didn't like it at first was because there was an extra scene. And once it was took out, the film was extraordinary, good and comedic and all that. This is the problem with this film. 2 or 3 scenes that if they were taken out, I think I would have given this 4.5.
Yeah,
Uh,
I totally agree with that.
it's so good, the dialogue, and you're so invested in the story, and you care for the characters at the end. Well,
Yes, that is very important, that you care for the characters. And I've come to realize that as we've been watching these movies, that there's some films where I'm more invested because I genuinely care about what happens to the characters. And this is a great example of that. Even though their romance is built in 5 seconds.
and
Uh,
even though their romance is to serve the good of the American government.
yeah, it's still great. I do want to say last thing, Hitchcock is the director that I've probably seen the most films from.
Mhm.
Which is interesting. I mean, that goes to show how much of an impact he's had on film itself, because he's not even in my top 5 directors when I think about directors, but yet I've seen the most work of his filmography, which just it's kind of like mind-boggling. I don't know how you feel about that.
I mean, Hitchcock is definitely one of the greatest film directors of all time, period.
Yeah.
And his influence on cinema is it's outstanding. However, for me, I think I've seen the most films from him as well, but maybe it's a tie between him and Ingmar Bergman. I think I've seen about the same amount.
Mhm.
But again, great classic simple stories. Those are the ones that last. And if
Mhm.
they're shot beautifully and if you have a good score behind it,
Yeah,
classic
music
that
is great. Was the music, because isn't there a Hitchcock film where he wrote the music, or am I making that up? I thought I watched like Foreign Correspondent or something, and it said written by Alfred Hitchcock. I was like, what? Like he wrote the music? Maybe I'm thinking of something else.
I'm not sure about that. I do know that Chaplin wrote his music for his film.
Oh, that might be it. That's my
That I
mistake.
know for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Either way,
Either
Notorious.
way,
See it if you haven't seen it, please.
exactly. Here it is again, ladies and gentlemen. Get the Criterion
Yeah. That
collection.
cover is so great. And one of my favorite Criterion covers for sure.
Same for me. And if you open it, you see, of course, Cary
What do we
Grant
got on the inside? Oh, there you go.
beautifully,
And the
and
key on the disc. Oh,
the key on the
great.
disc. Um,
Fantastic.
but enough with Notorious. Go and watch if you haven't. I'll probably link. The whole film is on it's on
On
YouTube.
YouTube?
Yeah, so
Great.
I'll just link the if I from now on, if I find the film on YouTube, and then I'll link it in the description below so you can go and check it out.
Sounds good.
But again, get the Criterion because you get special features and it enhances your viewing habits. Okay,
Yeah.
now at the end of the video, as you know, Peter, this was my pick for this week. Peter will be picking the following film for next week.
Yes.
Can't wait for
Yeah.
it. So lay it on us, Peter.
Okay. So we're taking a break from the classics and going back to the 90s.
Good.
As we did with Fear and Loathing. 90s seem to be a preferred decade of mine. Sorry, that's what we're doing.
Film
But they
bro.
have there's
Film
some
bro.
stop it. Stop. I will not be classified as that. I don't care. No, but there are genuinely really, really great films from the 90s in the Criterion Collection that you have still yet to see. That I think one of them is Thin Red Line, for example.
I have seen the
Just,
Thin Red
yeah,
Line.
just fantastic work that they put from the 90s. Anyway, I don't know if you've seen a film by Kiarostami.
By the famous Persian director Abbas Kiarostami.
Yes.
I have
I think
never.
Iranian, I don't know, Iranian, maybe Iran.
Iranian, yes.
Have you seen a film from him? That's a tragedy. So we're going to be watching Close Up,
Yes.
which is arguably his best film. I've seen oh my god, what's it called?
You've seen the
Taste of Cherry. Taste of Cherry, and I think that's it. Let me check real quick because I want to make sure. Abbas Kiarostami. Of course, it doesn't pop up right away. Why would it? Taste of Cherry. Yeah, I want to see Where's a Friend's House as well, and Certified Copy. But yeah, out of the Taste of Cherry and Close Up, I think Close Up is more important to watch.
Mhm.
So that's what we will be watching. And obviously, this is again one of my favorite covers. You can't see it well on here, but if you look on the website, it's fantastic.
Wonderful. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Join us next week talking about Abbas Kiarostami's probably his masterpiece, Close Up.
Yeah.
And until then, signing off.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap, as they say.